Hey guys, and welcome back to DIY Technical Design. We're in section 5 now, where we're going to be talking all about points of measure, how to create your graded spec, and how to create your very own how to measure guide. So let's remind ourselves what our POM page is. Our POM page is a list of all of our points of measure, and these are going to delineate where we're taking our measurements on our garment in order for our production facility or our factory to be able to make our garment. Also listed on your POM page is your tolerance and your grade. You'll also be creating POM codes for each of your points of measure so that it has a unique identifier. The reason that you want to create a unique POM code, which in my case I've just used numbers, but you could use letters or really anything you want to. The reason that it's so important is it's a great way to stay organized. It's a great way to just be able to quickly add your points of measure into your graded spec page. And in addition, it's a great way to reference specific POM codes, for example, in your review comments in a way that's much more shorthand than writing out the entire points of measure in your comments. So you might be wondering, what the heck is tolerance? Tolerance is the amount above or below your spec that you're willing to accept a sample. Your production tolerance and your sampling tolerance might be different. Usually your sampling tolerance is a little bit more strict while your production tolerance is a little bit more lenient. For example, if you had your sleeve length tolerance as 1/2 inch, then if your sleeve length came in when it was sampled from your factory as 1/2 inch over or more, 3/4 inch over, then you could reject the sample and ask the factory to make another one. Essentially, your tolerance is the amount above or below your spec that you're willing to accept your sample as. In all other cases, you will either reject the sample or ask the factory to go back to spec for the next sample. If you'd like to know how I set up my POM page and my graded spec page, you can check out section 1 of DIY Technical Design, where I go over how I set up each page in the tech pack.
Here's my formula for writing POMs. Start with a coding system. I like to use numbers. Enter your POM number and then the name of the POM. You should also specify if it's a full measure or a half measure. For me, I only specify half measures so that my factory knows the rest of my POMs are always going to be a full measure. The POM will be written out as follows. Measure, the type of measurement, whether it's width, length, height, or something else. From, your starting location, to, your stopping location, and at, the location that it's at. Here's an example. My POM code is number 004. My POM measurement is waist width, and it's going to be a half measure. I always like to bold this information so that it's easier to see. The POM then reads, measure width from side to side at waist.
So now that you've created your list of POMs based on the formula that I talk about in this section, you can start adding that to your tech pack. This template that you're seeing right now is the one that I go over in section 1 of DIY Technical Design, and it's also the same template that I sell on my website. So if you've already purchased this template, then the formatting will be the exact same as this. So regardless of what your formatting is for your specific POM list, what you're going to want to do is copy and paste all of your POMs into this format. And so I am just going to show you a couple of them. You'll add your tolerance, and then you'll also add the grade for your specific garment. So let's just clear all this out. And let's just say that my grade is like 1/2 inch.
And it'll be specific to your style and your brand, which I also talk about earlier on in this series. I talk about grading and sizing, so if you want to check that out, you can. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. Since they are the same type of measurement, they'll have the same grade and the same tolerance. And so now that you have this, all of your POMs in here, you can just go directly to your graded spec and you can put those POMs in here. And if you've used the VLOOKUP function that I talk about in section 1, then it'll automatically pull all of that information from your POM list and it'll put it into your graded spec. So let's try it out. Whoops. And you can see that here. So it looks like the font size is a little big, so you can just adjust that so that you can see everything and move it over here. However you want your formatting is totally fine. And then, you know, this is a men's style. Let's say our length is 30 inches at the back and 33 at the front. And that will automatically calculate based on your grade, the rest of your measurements if you've used the VLOOKUP function that I talk about in section 1.
We won't be going over how to create your specific garment specs in this series. But if you're wondering how to do so, you can take a retail sample and measure it. Using these specs as a baseline, you can then determine what the spec should be for your specific garment. I plan to go over this in a future series, but hopefully this quick method will work for now.
So this is a really easy way to set up your graded spec page with all of the POMs that are specific to this garment. For example, you might have 100 different POMs, but you may only need to use 20 of them for this t-shirt style. And so you would only put those POMs into this POM spot on your graded spec, but you can let the rest of your POMs still live on this page in case you need to reference them later. You don't need to delete them or anything. So this kind of acts as your library in your template. And then when you send it out to your factory, you can just hide this tab if you don't want them to see this information or be confused by it. I definitely recommend to hide it just so they're not looking at this and being confused by it in any way. And that way they're only seeing what's on your graded spec.
Some good practices and strategies for using your POMs in your tech pack is to never box in your factory when using your POMs. Only give them as much information is necessary to create the garment. You don't want to give them a measurement for every single point on the garment because that doesn't allow them any wiggle room to create specific pattern shapes. You really just want to give them the basics so that they're able to create the garment and then they're able to be creative in the ways that they need to in order to create the pattern. As always, don't duplicate information in the tech pack and make sure that your POMs aren't overlapping. Just like I said before, you don't want to box in your factory, but you also don't want to duplicate information that confuses your factory when they're trying to create the pattern for your garment. You'll also want to put your POMs in a particular order that makes sense to you. For example, the POM list that I have available on my website has the basic measurements first for tops, then specific detailed measurements for tops, then the basic measurements for pants, the detailed measurements for pants after that, and then some other detailed specific POMs for dresses and different styles of garments. Using this method makes it a little bit easier when you're going through and trying to decide what POMs you need to use in a specific style tech pack, and makes it just a little bit easier for you to decipher which ones need to go in and which ones you don't need. You also may need to add or adjust your POM to fit a specific style. I like to create my POMs as a little bit more generic in some instances, like for pockets, for example. So then for specific styles, I can go back in and change the POM to say exactly where that pocket is going to be, if it's going to be on the chest, if it's on a pair of pants. That way it's just a little bit easier to not have so many POMs in your library, and you're able to just adjust the ones that, or the base POM that you have, just slightly so that it fits your specific style. So let's get into what a how to measure guide is and how to use it. So now that you've created your POM list, you'll be able to create a how to measure guide based off of that list. What you're going to do is essentially just create a packet of either images or sketches that show visually where to measure the garment based on your POMs. So your POM list and your how to measure guide will correspond exactly. And that's another reason that having your POM codes is so important, because you can just list those in both places, and so it's very easy to find the information both visually and written. Your how to measure guide acts as the standard for how to measure your garment. There's many different ways to measure just one specific point on a garment, whether it's to the seam, to the stitching, just across the garment from edge to edge. There's so many different ways that you can interpret how to measure a garment. So this is essential for sharing with your factory so that you both are understanding the specs correctly, and when reviewing samples, they understand where you're measuring to and what it's compared against.
In order to create your how to measure guide, you'll want to set up a template in either Illustrator or whatever program you're using to create it, so that all of your pages look consistent and so that you can get the most information onto each page without overcrowding. So this is the format that we are going to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over and add another artboard so I can show you how I made this. And I'm just going to create a large square. And then I'm going to add a few lines so that I have a header space, and then 3 rows and 2 columns. All right, that looks good. Then we can add our header, and you can use whatever font or formatting you'd like. You can title it with your company name. You could add your company name at the bottom, whatever you prefer. I'm just going to make sure that's centered. And then I like to also add the date or the year in case you are updating this over time. So I'm going to add that this was created in 2019, and then I'm also going to add the page number. So in case I print it out and I don't staple it or something like that, then I know what page order it's in, because your POM should be in a order that makes sense to you. For example, I have tops first, then pants, and then special style POMs. All right, so now that you have your format set up, you can adjust it however you'd like. If you'd like to add color, if you'd like to change the line widths or anything like that, you can go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is show you how to add a single POM, and then you can use that format going forward for the rest of the POMs that you create for your how to measure guide. So I'm taking a POM from my POM list that I've already created, and you can create your own just as a basic list or in an Excel file, in a Word document, however you want to do that, using the formula that I already mentioned in this tutorial. And I'm just going to copy and paste it into this top section. And I like to always include the POM code, which you can see here. And I always like to bold what the actual POM name is. It just makes it a little bit easier to see. So you can see an example of kind of where I'm going with this here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a sketch I've already created
If you need help creating sketches, then you can check out my full tutorial on how to create technical sketches. That's on my blog, and I also have it on YouTube as well. And I'm going to copy it over here, just a basic t-shirt sketch, so that I can show how to measure the body length at front. And you can either, for example, on this body length at back POM, I didn't add any dotted lines, but I do like to add the dotted lines for high point shoulder, or if it's kind of hard to see where exactly you're measuring to. And then I'm also going to add one at the bottom hem, especially because this is a curved bottom hem. You want to make sure that you're being specific about where they are measuring to, where your factory is measuring to, or where you're measuring to. And then I'm also going to add an arrow, and the arrow is representing where the measurement is taking place. And of course, you can use any sort of formatting you'd like for your arrows. If you don't know where the arrows are, they just live inside of your line or your stroke window, and then the arrowhead options are right here. There's a bunch of different types you can use. So if you are not wanting to sketch, you can also use a photo. This is just a photo that I took really quickly, laying just a sample that I laid down and put a tape measure over the top. And so this is another way of creating that same POM, and putting it in a way that's a visual representation, but maybe is a little bit easier if you're not super skilled as in drawing or in Illustrator. You could also create something like this in InDesign, in Word. There's tons of different options. You could even hand draw it if you really wanted to. Really, the point is just to illustrate each of your POMs so that your factory understands how to measure your garments, and so that you have also established a standard for your brand.
All right, you guys, that does it for section 5 of DIY technical design. We're halfway through this series, and I hope it's been super helpful. Of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. You can view the other videos so far for this series in the playlist on YouTube or on my blog. Everything's linked below. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next week.